Welcome into Blitzalytics Top 5 Prospect Series. Today we are going to be doing our top 5 cornerbacks. I am joined by Cody Manning, Alexander Amir. Cody Manning is our Director of Content and one of our lead scouts. Alexander Amir is our Chief Editor and Director of Fantasy Football and also a scout for Blitzalytics. Gentlemen, how are we doing today?
I'm doing pretty good. Happy to be back on here, release my top 5 cornerbacks, and just talk with you guys, see how you guys like my list or not.
Yeah, I'm doing great. I think Jack and I looked at Cody's list before this, and it's exactly the same top five that we both had. So we were super excited about that. And we were also saying that we think this cornerback class has a chance to be the most positions picked in the first round because there's just so many good ones. So excited to get into it.
It's going to be right there with the tackle position. I mean, this is one of the most stacked classes. Like, after coming back and reviewing cornerbacks over the last couple of days, man, there could be all 5 of these guys could go. I mean, you could even see Diggs could slide in there. You could see all kinds of these guys, creep up the board. I could easily see 8 to 10 in the first 2 rounds. I would not be surprised. There's going to be as many defensive backs as there's going to be wide receivers, as there's going to be tackles. This is arguably the most stacked class we've graded out ever with Blitzalytics. I would say for sure at Blitzalytics at least. Probably in the last 5 to 10 years, though. I mean, there's just talent across the board from quarterback to running back, the skilled positions, down to the offensive line, the defensive line. You name it, everything is just... I'm excited. That's all I am. Thank God for the draft right now because we ain't got nothing else but.
Exactly.
Yeah, all right. You guys ready to jump on into it?
Yeah,
Let's do it.
Let's do this thing.
All right, let's see what we got here. Drum roll, coming in at number 5. We have AJ Terrell, number 5 out of Clemson.
AJ Terrell is one of my favorite players entering this class. I think he's got a lot of potential out of Clemson. His freshman year, he came in and as an immediate contributor. He had 10 games. He had 7 pass deflections and an interception as a freshman. His sophomore year, he started seeing more playing time as they went to go win the championship at Clemson. He had 53 tackles, 40 of those were solo tackles, 3 interceptions, 3 pass deflections, 2 forced fumbles. He was a third-team All-ACC this last year. And coming right before his junior year, I expected a bigger jump out of him, but I still think he put some great things on tape. He had 14 games, 34 tackles. He had 2 interceptions, 3 pass deflections, and he was named first team All-ACC. Some of the things I like about his game, he was long and athletic. He posted 4.42 40-yard time at the combine. I think he can match up with bigger wide receivers. I think he's got the speed to go stride by stride with burners in the next league. His agility is great. He can mirror wide receivers' routes. He's really great when using his length to his advantage. He can jam up in the wide receiver's shoulders in press coverage. Fluid in his hips. He can flip his hips and run, like I mentioned earlier. And I do account that he's got plenty of experience playing in big-time games. He's been to back-to-back national championship games, facing some of the best wide receivers in college football that we're going to see play at the next level. And like I said, he was one of my favorite wide receivers. Favorite cornerbacks entering this year. I expected a bigger jump. Whenever I did our cornerbacks last year, and I just remember watching Trayvon Mullen, and AJ Terrell popped out to me on the tape more last year than Mullen did. And I was a big fan of Mullen. He was in my top 5 cornerback list last year. So I expected to Terrell to make that bigger jump to prove that he could be a CB1. I think he put things on tape, but we saw that he could struggle sometimes. His ball skills need improvement. He needs to get his hands on the ball more often. Needs to improve his tackling. He tries to rely on arm tackles too much. He can allow wide receivers to get by him as he plays in deep zone coverage. He kind of loses track with his eyes. And then he can struggle to keeping up with his man at the top of routes. Breaks and comebacks can get him. And I guess my questions are around him if he maybe is better served as a cornerback 2 over being a cornerback 1 on a roster, and if he can handle wide receiver 1s. I know people want to point out to Jamar Chase blowing him up in the second half of the national championship game, which is understandable. But I do think he held him and contained him and Jefferson in that first half. He's just a guy that I think, he has potential to be a cornerback one, but he might be better served as a cornerback two. How do you guys view him?
Yeah, I mean, you hit on, I think, all the major points. I think his length is a huge thing, and the fact that he's able to be so fluid with that kind of balance, with that length, is really impressive. I think that well-rounded skill set is great. Plus, he's no problem with getting physical and getting aggressive. So he has all the tools to be any kind of corner and be a cornerback one. You touched on a bunch of his weaknesses, and I think he could improve his discipline. Likes to anticipate the quarterback a little too much, also. So I think it's really just about refining his game overall. You mentioned him against Jamar Chase in the championship game, and yeah, like there were some highlight plays that Jamar Chase made, but Terrell was right in position to make some of those plays. And like Chase, he probably would have been the number one, maybe number two wide receiver in this class this year. He's one of the best college wide receivers, and Terrell was right there with him. He made some plays throughout the game to shut him down for long stretches. And the big plays that Chase made, it was not lucky, but just unfortunate timing and unfortunate luck for Terrell. But I think for the most part, he did really well. And he's matched up, like you said, he's matched up against some top wide receivers in college football and definitely doesn't lack the experience.
Yeah, coming into the college football playoffs this year, he only had 30 total targets according to PFF. So it states that he can basically blanket anybody he faces, and he shut down everybody not named Jamar Chase this year. So it's proven that he can do it. I love the hip fluidity. I love the closing speed. It seemed like he tried to bait quarterbacks a lot, because even when playing man, that's something you'd love to see from a cornerback, especially a young corner. That they can play man, but then keep their eyes on the quarterback and not on the whoever they're defending. And he's able to stay stride for stride with them. He literally can mirror footwork beautifully, but he does try to bait cornerbacks. He gives them that space just to get the quarterback to throw at him. But I mean, when you only have 30 targets all season long, I guess you're trying to look for a little action. So you're trying to give up, a little room to maybe get something. But I was very, very impressed with what AJ Terrell was able to do and put on film. The length, the fact that he started as a true freshman. I mean, he's just a solid player. And any other year, I think he would be, in top 15, top 20 consideration, and still possibly could. But I think it's just such a stacked class this year that you never know what somebody like that's going to be. With his frame, he's a little light, in the ass, and he probably needs to put on some muscle at the next level to be able to tackle these guys. But it's not for a lack of effort. He does. It's not consistent. His mechanics in terms of tackling as a form tackler is not perfect by any means, but he doesn't lack effort. He's not scared to put his head into a running back, even at full speed. He's willing to. He's a willing tackler, and that's all you can ask for from a number 5 cornerback in this year's draft class.
Yeah, and he is somebody that we're all fans of. As of right now, he's number 49 on the Blitzalytics big board. As far as where I see him going, I think he's worthy of a first-round pick, especially if you are desperate for a cornerback. And like we were talking about, there's so many teams between like 19 on in the first round that need cornerbacks, and I can see 6 going in this draft. So obviously, if I could see 6 going, I definitely think he's worthy of it. So I think he goes in the back half of the first round. Maybe he falls to the beginning of the second. Some team fits, I think, the Oakland Raiders, he could join his former teammate and line up across him with Trayvon Mullen. I said Oakland. Jack, you gotta give me crap because I
didn't even catch it. I didn't even catch it. It slipped right on by me.
And I was the one saying you're gonna want to do it all the time. Las Vegas Raiders, Jacksonville Jaguars. They need cornerbacks. Minnesota Vikings could use a cornerback. I think the Titans need an upgrade in that room. And then 49ers. I think that definitely could be a landing spot for him because Richard Sherman is on the final year of his contract in San Francisco, and he's getting older as a player. I mean, do you guys see any other fits or where he could go?
I mean, every team needs a cornerback, and every team needs a cornerback with his skill set. I think again, he plays better in man than he does in than in zone. Even though he can still play both, I don't think he's a liability in one or the other. So I mean, it's not scheme specific. He may, because of his size, maybe early he starts off in nickel, but he could go anywhere. Literally from probably the 15th to 18th pick all the way up into the early, no later than 40, 45 that he's gonna go. And just because we have him at 49 doesn't mean he couldn't possibly make it into the first round.
Right. And I see him
Yeah, it
as
just depends
rookie year.
on how the draft falls. Sorry, I'm going to cut you off there. I just think it just depends how the draft falls out, and who teams prefer. Teams might prefer a Trayvon Diggs over AJ Terrell, but it really just depends on like the flavor that you're looking for.
Right. Yeah, and I see him as a solid rotational player. I think if he comes to the right team, I think he can play as a cornerback 2 on a roster his rookie year. I think his floor, he's at least a third or fourth depth piece that can start if he's needed to, and he'll probably at least have 2 full seasons starting in the NFL. And his ceiling, like I said at the beginning, I think he has what it takes to be a top cornerback on a roster if he reaches his potential, and he can be one of the top cornerbacks in the NFL. I just think he probably ends up landing somewhere in the middle, being that key cornerback 2 piece in a defense. But if he needs to, he can be the top guy, which is why I compared him to AJ Bouye. Same size, same kind of type of player, right? He's got the capability of being a number 1 cornerback in a roster, but he can really thrive when he has like a Jalen Ramsey on the other side.
Agreed. All right, moving on to number 4, Jeff Gladney out of TCU.
Yeah, Jeff Gladney, he's one of the fun quarterbacks to watch in the class just because how feisty he is. He came in and he's played all 4 years. As a freshman, he played in 10 games. He had 46 tackles and 6 pass deflections. His sophomore year, in 9 games, he ended up having 28 tackles, 2 interceptions, 5 pass deflections, and he was already mentioned as an honorable mention all Big 12 team. His junior year, he started seeing more playing time as well, with 13 games, 41 tackles. He had a sack, 2 interceptions, 12 pass deflections, and 1 forced fumble. And then this past year, he played in 12 games. He had 31 tackles. He had 1.5 tackles for a loss, an interception, and 14 pass deflections. He was named first team all Big Ten. And what I really like about him is he has solid ball skills. The past 2 years, he had over 10 plus pass deflections. I want to see more interceptions, but you can't complain about that. Like I mentioned, feisty player, very physical. He doesn't back down from a challenge. He's willing to jam. He'll knock wide receivers off their release. Very explosive. He can close space quickly to get the pass deflection or an interception. And I think he's outstanding in man coverage. He can stay attached to hips. Now, my biggest worries with him is his size. He's a smaller cornerback, so he does struggle with big body wide receivers. And if a team wants to stick him outside, he may struggle when he gets out in the boundary. He does need to read wide receiver eyes better. He has opportunities where if he would turn around his head quicker, he can get some of those interceptions. I think he could convert over the pass deflections. He just needs more consistency in his pursuit angles. He misses a lot of tackles just because of the way he runs after the ball carrier. And he does allow some inside releases when he's in off-man coverage. He kind of reacts slowly. So his instincts can maybe improve when he's not jamming a guy. And like I said, his route recognition can improve. He just allows separation towards the top of the routes as well when anybody gets a little wiggle on him. Now, I think he's going to be a guy that will thrive in the slot, though. I think he can be like an elite slot corner, and then if you need to move him out to the outside, you can.
Yeah, I think so. In terms of his traits, you touched on a bunch of them. I think his great footwork. He's super sticky against receivers. I think he's pretty disciplined too in coverage. I don't think he ever really gets wiped out by being too over aggressive or anything, despite the fact that he has the ball skills. And he has all those pass defenses. I think he matches up well with most types of receivers because of his physicality. But like you said, the big body wide receivers can be a problem. He has a thinner body and he can get overpowered. I think, because of his size, I think you might see someone like Terrell or Diggs go over him. And I think the value that you would get from getting Gladney potentially in like the early mid second rather than like a Terrell or a Diggs late first is great. So that's what I'm looking to see how the board shapes out. And like, you might be able to get very, very good value out of Gladney.
Looks small, plays big. That was the biggest thing I seen from him. For being somewhat undersized, he'll likely get pushed to the inside and would likely thrive in the slot or as a nickel corner. When we see how often it's like, what, 60-40 now that's they're playing dime or nickel. Most of the time teams are in pass coverage. You can't have enough good cornerbacks. I think Gladney is going to be he's going to be a steal at the back end of the first, second round, wherever he ends up going. He's better in zone. He's very instinctual. Breaks on the ball like you wouldn't believe. And he reminds me a lot of Yair Alexander from the standpoint of like when the ball's in the air, he's a boxer. He's trying to punch that ball out. He's ultra aggressive. He's got power in those hands to pull the ball out. He doesn't have those interceptions. They're not soft hands. They're strong hands. He hits like a Mack truck, when he's got a good angle, a good tackling angle. And again, for his size, he plays like he's got another 20 plus pounds on him. So I love that. He's slightly scheme specific. Again, he's going to be probably geared towards more of a zone heavy team. I believe because he doesn't have that hip fluidity. He can't he hasn't been able to turn his head around. It's not going to be something that it's not going to be something that it has to be done. But I just think he'll thrive more in that zone scheme.
And if he does go where we think of him as a team, our Blitzalytics board ranking currently has him at the number 29th player on the board. I think that's right around where he goes. I think the highest where he could go is New Orleans Saints, maybe at 24. I think he would be a great fit with the Titans, the Chiefs, and Niners could use him. And then if he does fall to the round 2, I think the Panthers could be a potential team because I think they need a lot of help after losing James Bradbury in free agency. Do you guys see any other team fits for him?
I like that a lot. I think if he potentially drops a little more, like I said, just depending on if a team likes some of these other guys more than him, I think the Bears would be an interesting fix. They do need a cornerback, and I think having him as like a nickel guy or someone that you can move around different spots in the defense would really help that defense, remain dominant and versatile.
I'm gonna leave it open. I mean, anybody from I think 25 to 50 could use him easily. I mean, he might even go earlier. But the fact that he is slightly undersized, I think they're gonna knock him a little bit for that. But he's got the speed, he's got the versatility, the athleticism. I would not be surprised if he's a top 3 cornerback off the board. Although I think the top 3 cornerbacks are pretty locked in.
Yeah, I do too. And I see him as a rookie. He'll be a rotational piece, playing sub packages, kind of like we've already been talking about, more focused staying inside with the slot wide receivers. His floor to me, he's a cornerback 3 or 4, but he also can provide special teams value as well. I think he could be a great gunner, worst case scenario. His ceiling to me, though, is if he does hit that potential, I think he'd be a cornerback 1 on a team, but similar to being like, I'm not saying that, I guess I'm saying this is his ceiling as a player, but similar to like Chris Harris, right? Like, yeah, he's the best cornerback on the roster, but we understand he plays more inside, over the outside, but he can move to the outside if he's needed, like Chris Harris did throughout his career. But his player comp to me coming in is Mike Hughes. He was in my top 5 a couple years ago. And he's kind of like in this. He's kind of like in the similar boat to me how I viewed Mike Hughes. He can be an elite slot corner. He can be on the outside, but he might struggle. And similar to Mike Hughes, everybody loved him as a player, but they weren't sure where he was going to go because of his size. But then he ended up falling off the board, right at I think 30 or 31 to the Vikings that year.
Coming in at number 3, we have C.J. Henderson out of Florida University.
C.J. Henderson, like we mentioned, he's one of the top 3 cornerbacks. I expect him to come off the board probably in the top 20 in this class. We'll see how that falls. But as far as how he did in college, he came in and played right away. He played in 9 games as a freshman, 22 tackles, 4 interceptions, 4 pass deflections. He was named freshman All-SEC team. His sophomore year, it was his best year, I believe. especially on the tape. He had 12 games, 38 tackles, 5 tackles for a loss, 3 sacks, 2 interceptions, 5 pass deflections, and 2 forced fumbles. He was named second team All SEC. His junior year, he only played in 9 games. He had 33 tackles, 3 tackles for a loss, a sack, and he ended up getting 11 pass deflections. But he was still named first team All SEC this past year. He's just an extremely athletic guy. His long speed is outstanding. He showcased that at the combine when he had the 4.39 40-yard dash. Very fluid in his hips. He can flip his hips with ease and run with any wide receiver. Explosive upfield against the run, and when he needs to jump in passing lanes, I think he's very impressive in his man coverage. He has a size to battle with the bigger wide receivers as well, and his footwork is great. He has the ability to reset his feet and attack the wide receiver and ball, which is something I really like about him. But it just, my biggest problem with him as a player is, as great as a coverage corner he is, if you ask for cornerbacks to be great in run support, he might not thrive in your system. He does need to be more physical when he jams wide receivers, more effort when he fights through blocks. He tends to dive at legs with his tackling, so he needs to work on his tackling technique, break down more often. He left way too many tackles on the field. His tackle for loss number could have been a lot higher than it is if he would just convert those tackles when he gets back there. And he allows way too many easy releases since he's not physical. I see a lot of inside routes thriving against him, especially even on deeper routes too. And then again, he could get more interceptions. He can even get more pass deflections if he reads the wide receiver's eyes more often. But he's still a great player. I just think his coverage skills are what's going to allow him to play at the next level.
Yeah, watching Henderson gives me a little bit of a bad taste in my mouth just because of that lack of physicality. And you really want to see an aggressive player at all levels of the field if you're watching football, and he's not that at all. And in terms of his tackling, the form needs to improve, the physicality needs to improve, but also he just doesn't seem to have the effort or want to stick his nose in there and make a tackle. It seems like he purposefully is taking odd angles so that he doesn't have to make a tackle unless absolutely necessary. So I don't really love that, but and sometimes he can get caught looking in the backfield too and trying to do a little bit too much. But like you said, the athleticism is absolutely insane. He basically runs like a top 5 wide receiver with the fluidity that he has, the length that he has, the footwork that he has. It's crazy how good of an athlete he is, and he can play in off man as long as he doesn't have to jam too much and zone. And he's so talented. He reminds me of Greedy Williams coming out a little bit just because of that lack of physicality and lack of tackling, but he does have that length and so much athleticism.
Yeah, I would say he's a little bit more physical than Greedy, and Greedy's got I would say CJ has more of a grown man body than Greedy does. Greedy's still got quite a bit to add to those toothpicks. But in terms of long speed, I mean, he's able to catch guys from behind. He's got the length, he's got the speed, he's got the quickness, the mirror ability, the hip fluidity. There isn't much from a man coverage perspective that he can't do, so I definitely think he's a little scheme specific and would thrive far more in a man heavy team than a zone team. A few things that he plays like an asshole. Like, he's good at jamming guys up. He's good, he runs the route for the wide receiver a lot often. Typically those interceptions came from literally him running the route better than the wide receiver did, cutting off the slant, cutting off the post, running the deep route and passing up the guy. He's just got that extra bit of burst that the wide receivers he faced just did not have. And so I really think that he's going to be a hell of a pro, at the next level, but he does need to work on it. Like you guys said, he's kind of an ankle biter. He goes after ankles. He doesn't necessarily go for big hits. He's not a form tackler. He's not. I would disagree and say I still think he is aggressive in his approach, and he's got a willingness to tackle. But it just isn't. It's like he's undersized. He tackles as if he's Gladney's size. And it needs to improve, but I don't think it's going to be a liability. I think if there's a running back coming at him, he's not going to back up like a Josh Jackson like we've seen years ago. He's still going to try to make the tackle. It isn't the prettiest thing.
And also at the end of the day, like what you want from a cornerback is to be able to cover. And, tackling is kind of a secondary issue from a cornerback's perspective for the most part, even though it's important. And he, like you said, the way he just runs the route for the wide receiver, and he has all the athletic tools that you want from someone.
Yeah, I agree with those statements. And you're right, Jack. He's willing to come up and hit. It's just I also saw what Alexander saw, where there's like some times where he's like, hey, my guy's got this. Like he'll just let them get the tackle if he can. But yeah, I mean, we're still big fans of him. Obviously, he's my number 3 on the board. Blitzalytics, we have him currently on our big board at number 17. I think he's a round 1 lock, like I mentioned earlier. I don't see him falling past these teams in the round 1. I think the Jacksonville Jaguars could take him at one of their picks. I think it might be a little bit too rich for me at number 9, but I can understand it if they do. Atlanta Falcons, Oakland Raiders, Dallas Cowboys, Minnesota Vikings, I think might be his floor at 22 or 25. Yeah, I mean, do you guys see any other teams maybe taking a swing on him?
I think Falcons and Cowboys have got to be it. Like, if not the Jaguars, one of those 2 teams are going to take him.
Yeah, that's what I would have said. Falcons and Cowboys are desperate for cornerbacks after losing both of their top guys in Trufant and Byron Jones. So I don't see any chance that he makes it past. I mean, if Tristan Fulton falls, then maybe it's going to have a residual effect and that snowball effect. But I just don't see it happening. I think both these guys are going to go top 20.
Yeah. I do. I agree with that too. I don't think he falls past the Jaguars' 20th pick. I think that's the absolute floor. But like we always talk about, with drafts, you just never know. So maybe he does. That's why I put the Vikings on there as maybe like the extreme floor for him. But yeah, I think he's got what it takes, guys, to be a starter as a rookie. Like we've talked about, if he's in that system that doesn't ask for too much out of run support out of him, he's probably going to thrive in his rookie year in coverage. Now, his floor to me, though, I think with how athletic he is and how great his coverage skills are, I think worst case scenario, he's a 3rd or 4th depth piece that helps out in covers covering the like 4th or 5th wide receiver on a team. And then his ceiling to me, though, he'd be a cornerback 1. He could travel with wide receiver 1s, and he's got all pro potential. My player comp for him is Byron Jones.
I like it. I see very similar, especially in length, the ability to go get the ball or the displace the ball in wide receivers' hands. I really like that one. All right, coming in at number 2, Christian Fulton out of LSU.
Christian Fulton's one of my favorite players in this class. He's a guy I would be totally happy if my team was able to leave the draft with him, which won't happen. But yeah, Fulton, though, he comes with some baggage, which he started off after his freshman year. He played in 3 games. He made 2 tackles, but following the season, he was suspended by the NCAA for 2 seasons after he tampered with a drug test for performance-enhancing drugs. He appealed the decision. He believed that the test was for recreational narcotics. I know he admitted he smoked some weed prior to that, so he was trying not to get caught. Fulton sat out the entire 2017 season, but he remained with the team. He participated in daily practices, and when I read up on it, he was still going to his classes. He was still getting good grades during this whole time. He filed for a second appeal after he hired an attorney, arguing that the proper drug testing protocol was not followed. The second appeal was originally denied by a panel of NCAA officials, and then they eventually overturned it. And then he was finally able to play after some time off. His sophomore year, he played in 7 games. He had 16 tackles, a tackle for a loss, interception, 6 pass deflections, and a forced fumble. And then he ended up suffering a season-ending ankle injury. Now, his past year, he got to play in all the games and show the type of corner that he could be. He played in 15 games. He had 38 tackles, tackle for a loss, an interception, and 14 pass deflections. And what I really like about him is his match and mirror ability. It's very impressive. He's able to lock on guys, go attach to their hips, run the routes with them. great athleticism and size. He can match up with the burners. He can play with bigger wide receivers. He showcased his 4.4 speed at the combine. His hip fluidity is solid. He can turn with ease. He's very smooth in his coverage ability. And what I really like about him is he's a very effective communicator. You see him always, moving his hands, talking to the other guys. He gets his message across the secondary. So to me, it shows that his football IQ is very high. He understands his role. He understands the scheme that they're playing in. And he showed up against the big top wide receivers in this class. This was per PFF, but against guys like Jerry Jeudy, Henry Ruggs, and Higgins, he was only targeted 11 times. He only allowed 3 catches for 39 yards, and he got 3 pass breakups. So, I mean, you're talking about 2 guys that are going to go in the top 15, and more than likely those 3 guys go in the first round, but we might see Higgins fall. Well, who knows? That's another debate we can talk on a Blitz breakdown or something. But his weaknesses, guys, that I do think he needs to work on. He can be a little too handsy. It's not the biggest weakness to me, but I always say that in the NFL that can lead to penalties. So he just needs to tighten those things up. I like to see more effort to fight through blocks. He kind of just runs with the wide receiver at times. Just needs to work on his timing. He misses opportunities and gets penalties. He kind of either jumps too early or jumps too late, and he just misses a potential pass deflection, interception, or he just hits the guy before the ball gets there. Shifty route runners can give him problems at the top of the route. I know Jerry Jeudy, even though he did great job on covering him, there's this one route where he got to the top, and I mean, again, it's Jerry Jeudy, one of the best route runners, but he can struggle with those shifty route runners. And then his play and route recognition, he can be hesitant when things develop in front of him, but maybe that's also too because he had so much time off between playing football, and now he's kind of getting back to used to it. And I think he's got a high ceiling because of that. Is there anything else you guys want to say on him?
Yeah, I just think my favorite thing about him is he's so well-rounded that he has the footwork and the flexibility and the speed to match up with those, smaller, faster wide receivers. But he's also physical enough and strong enough to match up with bigger wide receivers. And I think that's what puts him over Henderson for me just a bit. I assume for you guys too, to do the same rankings, that he's a little bit more versatile than Henderson is. I think he could be more disciplined using his technique rather than his instincts. He's super instinctual and he's very, very good instincts. But, his technique could be a little more consistent. He could rely on that a little bit more. But in terms of his skills, it's really great. And I think he can be a matchup against pretty much any team's number 1 receiver.
Yeah, size, speed, quickness, height, length. I mean, ultra physical. He's got it all. I think he's about as well-rounded of a prospect as it gets. And he would be in any other class that didn't have a Jeffrey Okudah, he'd be the number 1 corner off the board, and probably a top 10 pick. He completed, again, this is as per PFF, only allowed 40% of his completion rate since 2018. He breaks well, very instinctual, gives no room. Like, literally does not give any room for his corners. I think Jeudy is the only one I was able to see get any form of separation. If he would have had those extra few years, who knows how good of a prospect he would be? Because like you had mentioned, Cody, he's just shaking off the rust still. I mean, there's a lot of playing time that he missed, which, helps with in terms of, he's got less tread on the tires. He's got, less wear. He's got room to grow. And that says a lot from somebody who is, as close to a perfect prospect as it gets. Not that he's not perfect, not that he doesn't have, he's got flaws, but there's no red flags really to his game, at least on field. You could talk about a drug test, or you could talk about marijuana. It's a whole different topic. Again, we can bring that on the breakdown. But I think this is as close to a can't-miss prospect as it gets in the first round.
Yeah, and I like him so much. And now another thing I forgot to mention is obviously his injury history will be a question. I know he was banged up entering this year, and nobody's confirmed it, but they say like he was playing throughout the season banged up as well. So you got to give him that he fought through that so there might be concerns with that. I know we're still big fans of him in Blitzalytics. He's number 19 currently on our big board. He's a little higher for me. That's how much I think I have him at number 15 in my latest update. I think he does go day 1. I think he's a round 1 guy. There is some whispers out there he could fall to round 2, but again, like we all had talked about, there's just too many cornerback needy teams, and with him having such a high side, I don't see how a team could pass up on him. But again, if there's maybe a bad medical grade out there, maybe that pushes in the round 2, and I think somebody would get a steal if he, for whatever reason, would fall out the first round. But in the first round, though, I could see a team like the Falcons, Cowboys. We keep on mentioning these teams: Raiders, Jaguars, and Vikings. Like, all those teams need cornerbacks, so I think he'd be a great fit there. I mean, do you guys see him possibly falling out around 1, or do you see any other teams taking a swing on him?
There's not a chance. If he was playing banged up, I could only imagine what he plays like healthy. So it's not like he missed games due to injury. So I don't think you can knock that. A willingness to play banged up should be a plus. And the fact that most of these guys aren't even being able to get medicals, like we're hearing rumors of Tua's failing medicals. I don't know how that's possible when nobody can actually get a medical on him right now. So, I think he's gonna do just fine. I can't. Again, I'm saying can't miss prospect right now.
I think there's no way he falls past one of those Vikings picks in the first round, because they desperately need a quarterback after Rhodes. There's no. I think of their first pick. I think the pick that they got from the Bills is higher. Whichever that first pick is, that's where 22. He's going. I think there's no way he falls below 22.
Do you guys think there is a chance because of that C.J. Henderson could pass him up?
I definitely think Henderson could go up.
Yeah, it just depends. Depends on situation and how the board falls. But yeah, I mean, I did get my final grades on those two. And like, I mean, Fulton was like 0.02 on our Blitzalytics grading scale over Henderson. So I mean, I could see them easily being flipped. It's like, what, like Alexander said earlier, like with these cornerbacks, what flavor do you want? But yeah, I see him as a cornerback. I think he comes in as a cornerback 2 starter in a defensive unit. Maybe he has some struggles as he goes through a learning curve his rookie year. His floor to me, he's a cornerback 3 or 4 depth piece, just because maybe his injuries do keep up with him and he can't play a full season. But his ceiling to me, he's a cornerback 1. He can match up with any wide receiver. His ceiling to me, he's a Darius Slay at the next level.
I could certainly see it. Again, unless there's some lying injuries that we don't know about, I don't see how he slips past 15, 16. I think he's a can't-miss prospect, and he's non-scheme specific in comparison to C.J. Henderson. All right, coming in at number 1, we have Mr. Jeffrey Okudah out of The Ohio State University.
One of the most surefire picks you can get in this draft. Jeffrey Okudah, his freshman year, he came in, played 9 games. He had 17 tackles, pass deflection, and fumble recovery. Sophomore year, he played in 13 games, and he had 32 tackles, 8 pass deflections, and a fumble recovery. And then he just got to showcase his ability this past year, showing up in 13 games, 34 tackles, a tackle for a loss, 3 interceptions, 9 pass deflections, and a forced fumble. He was first-team All-American and All-Big Ten. He's just, I mean, he does a lot of things well, and you can't complain about it. He utilizes his size and athleticism to his advantage. His mirror ability is impressive about him. His ability to match with guys, no matter if he's in zone or man coverage. He can flip his hips. He has the speed to keep up with most of the wide receivers. And I love that he's just a physical player. He'll use his length to his advantage to jam up into the wide receiver's shoulders, and he's not afraid to come up and lay a thud. And he's not scheme dependent. I think he can go anywhere and thrive. And I mean, I feel like I was just being nitpicky here with his weaknesses, but like he's suspect of allowing inside releases to efficient route runners if he isn't off for zone coverage. I did notice that. Again, like I said this earlier with Fulton, it's not necessarily a bad thing, but his spiciness could lead to penalties at the next level. His tackling form could use some refinement, but like we talk about, tackling to us is not the biggest need in a cornerback, as long as you're willing to come up and lay a thud like he is. And guys, I don't have a lot of weaknesses. He just has small things he can work on.
Yeah, his technique is basically perfect, and it's like ridiculous to see that it looks like he knows what the wide receiver is doing before he does it, and there's not an ounce of daylight in between the wide receiver and Okuda, throughout the route. It's insane. And on top of his technique, he has every physical gift you'd want. Like he has the athleticism, the flexibility, he has the foot speed, he has the general deep speed, and he has the physicality. And I really like, as technically proficient as he is, every play, whenever a run is coming around off the edge, or he's trying to get by a block to get to the ball carrier, like he's super physical with it, and he like you said, he really comes up to lay a thud on ball carriers. I think if there's anything specific to improve on, I think he could probably get even more suffocating if he kind of became a little more instinctual than technical. So like, since his technique is so good, he relies on it, and it works pretty much all the time. But he could be absolutely smothering if he used his instincts, I think, a little bit more without sacrificing too much technique. But like you said, that's like as nitpicky as you can get. And he's if anyone's a perfect prospect, at cornerback, it's him.
Yeah, top 5 pick for sure. I think he goes to the Lions if everything pans out. I don't see him sliding down the board. If anybody gets him past 4 or 5, that they're getting a gimme all pro player. Year 1, year 2, I think he's gonna have a Jalen Ramsey like impact. He's aggressive in the run. He's aggressive when the ball's in the air. He doesn't give up space. He's got closing speed. I know he only ran a 4.48, 4.49 at the combine. It's his playing speed does not say that. His playing speed with pads on is way faster than that. Nobody got by him. Nobody burned him over the top. There's nothing you really don't like about him, and especially the fact that any chance he got to pick that ball off, he was picking it off. That's the one thing you can knock about some of these other guys is they gave up, potential interceptions. Not him. There's even plays that are shown in the highlight reel where he's on his back and he still finds a way to catch the ball and pick it off. And he's got such good body control when he's in the air. He's one of those, if he was a wide receiver, he'd be a 60-40, 80-20 type of 50-50 guy. He's just that good.
Yeah, and we love him as a team. He's number 5 on our big board ranking. And honestly, he should go in the top 5. I don't see how he does fall out. Like you said, I think you could pretty much Sharpie it that he'll fall into the Lions, even if the Lions trade back to number 5. I mean, I think Redskins do stay at number 2, but for whatever reason, that they did get that big offer for somebody to come up and maybe get a Tua or whatever the case is, and they were to drop back, I think they have a need at the cornerback position. So I could see him going there. Like you already said, Lions feel like it's the Sharpie one. If for whatever reason, we've seen crazier things happen. We saw Clelin Ferrell go in the top 5 last year, right? So whatever happens, if he does fall in the top 5, I don't see how. I'd see the Panthers would definitely have to make that decision if they wanted him over maybe a guy like Isaiah Simmons. If he were to fall to the Cardinals, Patrick Peterson's on the last year of his contract, and he didn't perform well after coming back from his suspension last year, so that would be a spot. And then, the absolute, I don't know how you get here is the Jaguars at number 9.
Yeah, it's an instant replacement for Jalen Ramsey if they have him there.
I mean, we all agree. There's no reason he falls that fall. Not a chance, but there is crazy scenarios in this league.
We've seen guys go ahead of Jalen Ramsey in that draft class, and I'm sure the Cowboys are kicking themselves in the ass right at this point. I'm sure there's plenty of teams that were remember, what were we thinking? I mean,
yeah, I remember that draft, and Jack, you say you're a Cowboys hater. I'm not the biggest Cowboys fan either, and I was like, it's a lock. Jalen Ramsey to the Cowboys, they need it. And then I think I was working the Bucks draft party when I was with Tampa Bay at the time, and anyway, it came out on the screen Cowboys select Ezekiel Elliott, and I was on break and we were all watching it, so I was able to swear. I was like, these idiots. Why would you take a running back over Jalen Ramsey? Anyways, guys, stay on track. Okuda, immediate impact player. I think he can come into a roster, especially if you're picking in the top 5 like a Detroit. He'd be your best cornerback on the roster from day one. His floor, if his technique falls off and I don't know, his play falls off, he's at least a cornerback 2 or 3 on a roster, solid contributor to a secondary. But his ceiling is what I think he can reach. He's a cornerback 1 of the best corners in the league. He's got all pro potential. And Jack, you already said it. His player comp for me is Jalen Ramsey. He can, and the reason why is what you said. he can come in from day one and make that immediate impact and improve a defense.
All right, what about your
Should we get into
superlatives for this draft class? There
should
is
we go ahead and
plenty.
get it?
There is
Yeah,
plenty of
superlatives,
other.
plenty of guys. Yeah, I'll go ahead and get into it. Trayvon Diggs, to me, he's really one of the best man coverage guys. Guy that's kind of fallen off in the process because he got hurt in this past year is Bryce Hall. I have him as one of the better zone coverage guys you can get in day 2 or day 3, depending on where he falls with injuries. A guy that was getting round 1 talk prior to the combine, Cameron Dantzler. I have him as a nickel cornerback. He's a really great coverage corner, and he's kind of he's got the size, right? He's 6'2", but he's like 180. So I think he would be better inside. And while his 40 time might scare some people, I still think about the time when he shut down Jamar Chase this past year. So I think maybe he could thrive as a nickel at the next level. Run support for me is Damon Arnett. I think he's one of the sure tacklers in this cornerback group. Another guy I really like is Jalen Johnson. I think he can be a playmaker. He's got a pretty high ceiling as a player. There is some talk that he could go round 1. We were talking about prior to this, obviously with him having a torn labrum that he got surgery done the week after the combine. There might be some teams that are concerned with that. But there are other guys I like Darnay Holmes, Dane Jackson. I kind of getting caught up on the guy. I can't say his last name, but Noah.
I was going to mention.
Yeah.
I'll let you
former
butcher
wide
that
receiver
one.
turned cornerback. He's got a lot to work on. That's why I didn't list him here. But there's a pretty deep class. Is there any other guys or do any of these guys stand out to you guys?
I think Trayvon Diggs to me is the number 6 for sure, and he could have crept up, but you could have made a case for number 5. Same with Jalen Johnson. I think if not for the torn labrum, he would be in that conversation for number 5. I think there's 5A, 5B, and 5C with those guys, and he is ultra aggressive. He can break on the ball super quick. While living in Utah and Salt Lake City, I got to watch him play quite a bit. He's a stud. We've seen him at the Senior Bowl. He's just a stud. There's nothing you do not like about his game, and for me, I would rather him get that torn labrum fixed now than have the Jonathan Abrams issue and not fix it and try to let it heal naturally, and then miss an entire season. So I think that's smart, and he's having to make that decision, and the executive decision on his own, basically, or at least listening to his agent. But the one thing is, and you said this earlier, is that he's going to have to rehab that without being able to go into the Utah facility. He has to rehab that on his own. So hopefully he's getting good direction, at least being able to have conversations with his doctor, over Zoom, over Skype, which I'm sure he is. But it would be nice for him to be getting, often getting those MRIs to see with progress. But who knows where we'll be in a couple weeks? We're some of us are 2 weeks, some of us are 3 weeks into the quarantine time right now. And who knows if things are going to get opened back up in a few weeks and he will be able to get those medical clearances. It's kind of one of those things that we got to wait and see.
Yeah, I think you mentioned Trayvon Diggs as the number 6. I think he's number 6 for me as well. And I could see him creeping into the first round to the 49ers. He seems like the type of player with that physical press coverage and the tackling ability they would like. I really like the Bryce Hall pick for zone. I think his recognition, ball skills, and tackling is perfect for that zone scheme. I think, for a team that runs that, he'd be a really, really nice option if they miss out on some of these top guys. And then, like you said, Noah Igbogany, or however you say that last name, from Auburn. I really like him. I think his upside is really, really high. He's only played cornerback for 2 seasons, and obviously the technique and mental aspect all need lots of improvement. But in terms of his traits, he's got the strength, speed, and excellent body control. And I think, you can mold him into something really, really good in any kind of system. So I think he's definitely someone to keep an eye on in the later rounds for a team that, maybe doesn't desperately need a cornerback, but is looking for someone to mold for a role.
Yeah, I think Cam Dantzler, though, could also be a super sleeper. That film against LSU was outstanding, and he may be one of the best value picks amongst all these names that we talked about.
Yeah, and with him too, and you could say this about a lot of guys, but It's obviously it was a big talking point, like with the whole combine schedule change. Maybe that did lead to him having a bad 40 time, sitting around all day, you know, which sucks because who knows? Like that's what sucks about this whole quarantine pandemic is just like guys like him didn't get to have a pro day. But like we saw this morning, though, he might be able to do something like Grant Delpit, where he can record his pro day. They say he ran a 4.39, like we were talking about earlier, Jack. How much can you trust that? But at least there's something on film that maybe you can try to time out, and so maybe he can boost back up his stock. Because I mean, I remember right before the combine, people were talking first round. That was still crazy to me, even as great as he was on tape. But I think he could really thrive in a nickel role.
Agreed, gentlemen. It has been a pleasure. I hope to do this again with you guys here very soon. I think we've got plenty more top 5 prospect series videos to do. We've got defensive line, D end, linebackers. We're chipping away, but we got some offensive line prospects still to go. So hope to have you guys back again. And make sure everybody checks out all of our scouting reports. You got scouting reports on all these guys right now on Blitzalytics.com. You can go to Blitzalytics.com, hit that scouting button, or Blitzalytics.com/scouting. We have our patented scouting metrics. We are the first company, the first team to ever fully integrate an analytical equation into a scouting report. So we feel that our grading system is a little more accurate than most. Not to point out any names or call anybody out. We feel like we hit homers here. So again, thank you guys for tuning in. Hit that like, subscribe button, and follow us on all platforms. This will also be available in podcast format. So you can check us out on Apple, Spotify, SoundCloud, iTunes, you name it. We are on all platforms, iHeartRadio, all of them. So again, hit that like, subscribe button, and please check out Blitzalytics.com for all of your scouting and draft needs. Gentlemen, where can they find you guys on Twitter?
I am at Cody Talks NFL. So if anybody wants to at me for any of my takes on these cornerbacks or safeties that we've covered, come at me, and I'll be back to talk linebackers here shortly.
Yeah, I'm at Amir NFL. That's AAMIR NFL. I'll be releasing positional rankings soon, so keep an eye out for that. I'm always happy to have a nice, cordial Twitter debate about any of these rankings.
Cordial. Nothing's ever cordial on Twitter. These guys are crazy. All right. Again, thank you guys for tuning in. Blitz out.